So, hey, we're talking about something pretty important today, and it is related to tips. Tips. You know, yeah, during the pandemic time, have you ever seen the news about the people who work at the restaurant get this big tips from the customer? Just a lot of heartwarming stories, right? So all of that, and you want to kind of, tax people are really, really boring because what they're thinking is all about taxes, right? When I look at this big ticket of tips, I'm like, oh boy, a lot of Social Security, Medicare for that employer need to be submitted. So I see the consequences of those tips. But tips is a industry specialty, especially today. And I knew that a lot of our restaurant owners and their people who work in the restaurant actually making good tips right now. So this is what the importance of, and we know that we need to talk about it. A lot of you wants to know all about it. So let's go ahead, talk about tips. Okay, here, my name is Ying. I am the founder of Community CPA back in 1998. So don't try to guess my age. I'm only 28. So, all the time in between doesn't count. Only count when we talk about work experience, right? Then you can't be really doing what you're doing when you're only 28. I know that. I know that. That takes 30 years to accumulate. All right. And here I serve on the National Taxpayer Advocacy Panel. This is the Federal Advisory Committee to IRS. And this committee includes all kinds of people. And when you are on the committee and you actually work on, providing advices to IRS to make IRS a better agency for you and me. So no responsibility disclaimers. This is our corporate lawyers, and I made sure I say that every time I'm online because I do make mistakes, and you want to take knowledge with critical eyes, right? Just watching what you got, and don't take internet everything as true. And there are people lying, without their eye blinking, and they just got into this pathetic liars. And what can you do, right? So you don't want to trust the internet to that degree, but you can definitely trust Community CPA as a whole. And we will do our due diligence and making sure we provide good service to you. And the tips, what is considered tips? Tips are discretionary. Okay, discretionary just means is not required. Discretionary payments determined by the customer that your employee receives from that customer. So if you're a restaurant owner and if you go up to your customer goes, you must pay me 20%. That's not tips. That's gratitude, right? That's a service fee. But if you don't say anything as a business owner, you let your employee service that customer, the customer left you with $1 million. Discretionary, optional, extra money, that is tips, okay? Common industry include restaurant, hotels, hospitalities, and casinos, right? Those are common industry that would have tips. Tips includes cash tips, of course. That is the dollar. That is the money you got. And tips can also be something non-cash. For example, baseball tickets and things in that nature. Those are non-cash tips. But tips also come through not just by cash, right? Tips can be on part of the credit card payment, and because they put down the tips amount, right? The amount received for a waiter or waitress, and they receive tips. Maybe sushi chef right at the counter serving customer, they also receive the tips from the tip pools. Those are all tips. Those are called tips. And all the tips, all the cash and non-cash tips that received by employee are income. And when we receive income, it's taxable. When we say taxable, I make a clear definition of taxable, because a lot of times we get confused when people talk about taxable, especially when you deal with retailers, you deal with the state government employees, and they come around to audit you. They go, this is taxable, that is taxable. They're talking about sales tax, taxable. But right now, in this webinar, we're talking about income tax, taxable. So it is income subject to federal income tax. And also, not just that, subject to what? To Social Security Medicare taxes. And it must be reported to the government by the employer. So for employee, you have the responsibility. If I am a waiter or waitress, I need to report to my restaurant owner how much tips I got for the month. If tips received by the employee during a single calendar month by a single employer, which means like you work in the one restaurant, just that one restaurant, are less than $20, then these tips are not required to be reported. So what that says just means that if you are working at the restaurant and you receive in that giving calendar month, you only got $20 tips, then you don't need to give that to you don't need to report to your employer, to your restaurant owner. When I say report, I don't mean by saying that you take the $20 or $30 out of your pocket, give to your employer. No, you don't need to do that. You just need to tell the employer, the restaurant owner that, hey, I got some tips. This is the amount. All right. So in this webinar, I'm going to split up. And the one section, I'm going to talk about the waitress, your responsibility. And then later section, I'll talk about the restaurant owner, your responsibility. So we will split up the tips in two sections. So now, employee responsibility tips received. You know, how many, as a successful small business owner, you own a restaurant, and how many times did you tell your employee that they are responsible for something? Probably not. You didn't tell them. But now, after listening to my talk today, I want you to just, go onto YouTube channel, carve out this section, and tell your employee that, folks, you need to do that. Okay, let me tell you what that is. And keep a daily tip record. That's their responsibility. Report tips to the employer unless the total is less than $20 per month. Report all tips on the individual income tax return. That is your employee responsibility. Number one, record that daily. Number two, tell that tips amount total to you by the 10th of the month. Like if for September and by October 10th, they need to tell you what the total is. And they are responsible to file their income tax return with the tips amount. If it is not cash, if it is non-cash, they don't need to report to you, business owner, okay? But they need to report that on their tax return as a monetary value because that's taxable income, right? So, okay, like waiters, waitresses, and make sure you know that. So you probably ask me, okay, fine, that's my responsibility, but how do I keep a record? You can use this form called 4070 form. If you just go online and type into 4078, you're gonna find it, print it out, and start writing it down. Keep a record, the day and the value of any non-cash tips that you received, and also cash tips that you received. All right. And so write it down. But you may say that, oh, Ying, I also have a lot of tips that I didn't receive it. And my restaurant owner received it. Don't worry. Those tips, they know what they are, right? So they already built that into your payroll, even if you didn't give them any cash tip amount. But for you, your responsibility is to report your cash tips to your restaurant owner. Now, this is a form 4070A. You see that employees daily record of tips, right? If you look closer, it tells you that employee's name and address, employer's name, the restaurant's name, and also the month of the year you put in October. Then October 1st, and then you just keep it up with all of these. They even have a column B tips. And if you knew your credit card tips and you will write it down, but the employer will not duplicate your tips. They know what you have from the POS system, but what they don't know is the cash tips that you have, right? Now, how to report the tips to your boss. The tips, if totaling $20 per month or more, that should be, you should give your boss a written statement. That means it is in writing, and no particular form required, but you can write it on a piece of paper, but you need to include your signature, your name, address, and the social security number, and the month that you are covering, right? An example would be the form 4070. And then look at this form. I got that copied for you. So you literally just gonna write down the tips amount, okay? Cash tips received, that's A. And the credit and debit card tips received, if you don't know, is in the POS system, just say don't know. And the tips paid out, and then those tips are in your pocket. Your cash tips literally is your tips paid out, because that's the money you're not giving back to your boss, right? You keep it. So you will add them up and then sign, right? That is that. And then I noticed that they're saying you're gonna add line 1 and 2 minus 3. So that's what you're gonna tell your employer, your boss, what you are doing. And the reporting tip tax return. Remember, we said that not only you need to report your tips to your boss, you also make sure that you report that on your tax return. If you have tips you did not report to your boss, and you use form 4137 on your tax return, so it is very possible that you have this tips amount and you accumulate it, then you moved your restaurant and you just really never really got involved with the previous restaurant anymore, but you do have the tips. Then when you file your tax return and you want to remember that form is 4137. So this is where you report the tips that you did not report to your boss, because if you didn't report to your boss, you know that you didn't get the Social Security Medicare benefit. And you might say that, what do you mean by that? That's just money I always pay. I don't want to pay. Folks, let me tell you, it is really, really important for you to actually pay Social Security Medicare. And you know that Enron went belly up, Lehman Brothers went belly up, and then those private companies, they have their days to go belly up. And I know you probably say, well, no, that's not true. New York Life has been survived for 150 years and didn't go belly up, and that's not true. Yeah, it is not true, but every private company has the opportunity to go belly up. And if you don't save your money in a place where relatively stable and are not going to go belly up, and the safest place to put your retirement is what? Is with Social Security Administration, because that is government managed pension plan. And I always tell my folks that if you have to put in money to IRA, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, SEP plan, simple IRA, you name it, you want to put money in there, you know that you're putting the money with the private companies. And of course, most of the private companies are running legitimately and it would not go belly up without you knowing it, but they are private companies, okay? And then your money out there is no different from your money paying Social Security Medicare, stay at a Social Security Administration. So when you turn your 61.5 years old, you get money every month, then till you die. And if you happen to be those lucky ones, live till 120 years old, then you're just gonna not only make your money back, and you also made the premiums, right? So really, Social Security Medicare should never be viewed as a burden. That is something you want to put all the money you have into there and to get your maximum Social Security Medicare. And when you retire, you have your money coming in, you have your medical insurance covered by your Medicaid program. And if you are wanting to go back to your home country, say go back to Vietnam and to have your retirement, then your Social Security money and is still there. And you can still have the money wired over to your country, and you can have a retirement at your home country per se. And, of course, I call US the home country because that's where we raise our kids and we grow up here. But, you could literally take your Social Security money to somewhere else. So that is why I advocate for you to report your cash tips so you can get a bigger portion of that pension. And here, I want to say to you that this is a YouTube channel we have. This is a particular YouTube webinar I prepared for employees in the restaurant. There's more and more employees in the restaurant are making so much money. I have a client. She is a professional waitress. I'm telling you, I say professional waitress because her tips is literally over $5,000 a month. Okay. And with that said, it is so important you go to click this video and watch because you want to take care of your future. You want to understand why you're getting this paycheck this way. Okay. So that is one I want to show you. You can just go on to search that on our website. So now let's talk about employer responsibility. And you know that in the restaurant industry, we have to make sure you're paying minimum wage, right? So sometimes when for waitress and waiters, you don't need to pay minimum wage and you pay a discounted wage, but you make sure that the tips they're getting are actually supplemental to their wages, so they still meet the minimum wage requirement. So with that, there's a bunch of employer like restaurant owners responsibility. Number one, you are required to retain employee tips report. Don't tell me that, oh, I lost it all. No, you are required to retain those tips report, required to withhold taxes based upon wages and the tips income received by the employee. Of them, and they're required to pay employer share of Social Security Medicare based on the total wages paid to the tipped employees as well as reported tips income. So what that says is that if you have a good customer writing a $5,000 tips for your employee, and the sort of the news for you is, and you will pay Social Security Medicare on that $5,000. So that's your portion, right? And of course, your employee also share a portion, but your portion roughly 8%. So you can see that you are ending up paying $480 on the taxes for the employee. And you must put tips reported by the employee onto the employee's W-2 form. Of course, you're going to do that because you work with our firm and we run W-2 for you. And we actually track your tips and making sure that you got that. And report 941 to return, that is your CPA firm, your payroll processor, and whoever does your payroll, they know to do that for you, okay? And the most responsible thing, the form 940 FUTA tax return. That's the federal unemployment, the contribution you need to make on behalf of your employee. So it is your responsibility, not your employee's responsibility. Social Security Medicare taxes on unreported tips. So if your worker failed to report tips to you, you is not liable for the employer share of Social Security Medicare on the not reported tips. Remember, they have their form to fill up. So you're not liable until, this is the key, until notice and the demand for taxes is made by IRS. Why is IRS saying that? Because they might be auditing your waiter. If they audit your waiter, realize that he got a bunch of tips that he never told you, but he also did not report taxes. So IRS come over, made him report income tax, made him to file the right form, and then IRS will send a letter to you, goes, based on our audit, and your employee had unreported tips of such, and you owe Social Security Medicare on your portion. That's when you will be liable. So basically, you're not liable until something happens, right? The employer is not liable to withhold and pay employees' share of Social Security and Medicare on the unreported tips. So what that just says is that you're only going to pay half of it and your employee is paying their own, right? And of course, the service charges like gratuity, it is actually not voluntary, right? Because when you have party of 10, for example, and you go to the restaurant, the customers sit down, they have a party of 10, the restaurant owner will say that if they have party of 10, we charge 25% gratuity. That is a service fee. So that is not exactly tips. So you want to know that that is doesn't subject to all of these requirements on the tips. You need to put that on the payroll and to submit Social Security Medicare. There's no such a thing about gratuity was unreported tips and we don't know about it. How could you not know? Because you are the business owner, you imposed that fixed fee on certain table, right? On certain size of the customer. But however, customer normally would still pay tips. So then you got the tips back on your pocket again. And the FICA tip credit for employer. I want to give you an example to get you impressed with what kind of benefit you are getting as a business owner, and you actually get it for you. And it comes once a year. It is going to put money back in your pocket in your 1040 if you are a S corporation. If you are not S corporation, let's say if you're a C corporation, of course, put the tax credit back into the C corporation. But if you're 1065, 1120S pass-through entities, it will put money back in your pocket. The employer with employee tips are required to pay tips. The employee's collection from the tips, the employee collected from the customer as tips are considered income under FICA, right? FICA is including withholding, Social Security, Medicare. Restaurant owners receive an incentive for their workers' tips earning. It is called a FICA tip credit, which can potentially save restaurant a lot of money, And let me give you 2 slides to show you, to impress you. This is a 1120S. You can see on the top left-hand corner, that's a K1 1120S. And then you see that this restaurant, this is a restaurant. This is the 1120S given to the restaurant owner, 100% own the restaurant. And you can see that the restaurant didn't make money. It's 167,000 loss. But you also see there is another credit, shows 12,929. What is that? What is that, folks? That is your FICA tip credit. That is the credit is reimbursing back to you on the Social Security Medicare taxes you paid for the portion that is outside of your minimum wage. So let's say if you $, but $20 need to pay to the employee because that will cover their minimum wage. Then the other $8 when you pay the Social Security Medicare, that will become that credit for you. See how that impact your 1040. So this business owner actually put 12,099 in here. And this is a tax return. This is actually 2019 tax return. So then that $12,099 in there. And you see that $9,058 on the line 17, that is their W-2 withholding amount. So that is coming out. Then plus the $12,099. So their total refund is $20,715. So did you see my point? You actually get the $12,099 back into your pocket because you are treating your tips work accurately and you're accounting tips income properly, and you get that refund. It's called a FICA tips credit. So that's for the employer, folks. All right, now we concluding our talk about tips. I hope you are clear with what employee does, what employee do, and what employer would do. And I also hope that you will check on our YouTube channel to learn to give that video to your employees so they know what their paycheck is, how their paycheck is being affected by your tips, right? By the tips that they receive, and know that they have certain responsibility. At the same time, know how much you can get back with reporting tips properly. So I hope that gives you some excitement for being a restaurant owner, and also give you some excitement knowing that you will be okay to have your employee reporting tips properly, and encourage them to do the right thing so you can have them be enjoying their Social Security Medicare saving, have a good retirement, just like everybody else. What's the difference? I think working as a successful a waitress and waiter is the same as being a successful accountant. You know, we're all making money and we're all saving for our retirement, but reporting tips properly will get you there. All right. I will talk to you again and hopefully see you on Saturday. And this Saturday, our topic, it is tips to avoid audit before October 17th. That's a big topic. I'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.